Alright guys, so this video was requested by one of my subscribers who goes by the name of George Tristan, and he wanted me to give my thoughts on this movie. Now this right here is a masterpiece. This movie was way ahead of its time, and I'd say was more relevant than two at the same time, because the same stuff had been going on a long time with tech just making it worse due to social media, basically, as we are bombarded with mind control propaganda constantly, whereas before it was just the television and newspapers doing it. So this movie was directed by John Carpenter and is entitled They Live. I really do love this movie and have watched it trillions of times, and it never gets old. My uncle was a huge wrestling fan, and I wasn't even a huge wrestling fan during these times until '96, but I knew who Roddy Piper was. I've seen a few of his Piper Pit segments that my uncle used to play on his VHS tapes that he recorded, and man, Hot Rod was one of a kind. You know, he was just an incredible entertainer. He was over with or without a belt. He was a huge part of Hogan and WCW's rise to the top. Plus, he's had better movies than Hogan, this being one of them. And at times I thought he was more popular than Hogan. I mean, let's think about it. Piper was huge in Portland, Vancouver, San Francisco, and was popular in Georgia and Mid-Atlantic, while Hogan was still making a name for himself in the AWA. Piper remained a big name in the Pacific Northwest and may have been close to Hogan working those specific areas, so there you go. And yeah, I know, nationally speaking, by early Hulkamania era, nobody could touch Hogan. And nobody really surpassed him until Austin, but enough with the wrestling talk. That could be a whole different topic for another video. But yeah, this is one of those movies I've watched since the early 90s when I was a kid. And I've seen it so many times since then that it's become more relevant the more I've rewatched it. It kind of reminds me of The Matrix, where both stories are about reality not appearing what it appears, but to me it's way better than The Matrix since the story is more straightforward. Not many were really aware of what was going on back in the 80s and 90s. Now with the advent of the internet, way more people are aware of people that are truly in control of this matrix. The idea of this movie is just amazing, and the scenery is spectacular. The comic underlining fits incredibly well with this movie. The comments Roddy Piper makes are hilarious. This tale of aliens living among us is on the surface a neat, somewhat tongue-in-cheek popcorn flick with a formidable hero in him almost throughout the film, seeing and discovering things as he does. And underneath it all, it is a sharp attack on the greed is good era it was made in, with the rich and powerful corrupted by their greed while those less fortunate are less to suffer. Movies aren't made like this anymore. This movie takes it one step further and adds the element of maybe these lawmakers and media folks are actually aliens from another planet trying to hypnotize us. When Roddy Piper puts on the special pair of sunglasses, we see the real world that the aliens have set up, and that the humans are sleepwalking through social apathy being another key point that comes under fire. Ads blare out consumerism culture and the materialism is in our face, but the glasses reveal their sinister true meaning. And it makes one take a second glance at everything when one walks through the nearest town. And then there's the aliens, right-wing ultra-capitalists exploiting the poor for their own ends. I figured it would be something like this, mutters Roddy Piper's character, seeing the president in his real form. Once the setup is over, it's time for the action. When the aliens are altered to Roddy's discovery of their preference, tension rises dramatically as our hero finds himself on the run from the alien-controlled authorities when he kills some of them in self-defense. And then out of anger takes out a few more when he winds up in a bank. And that's where he gives his "I'm all out of bubblegum" line. After egregious but amusing fight, the long drawn-out fight scene where Roddy tries to get his buddy to just put on the damn sunglasses is an allegory. It shows how hard it is to get people to open their eyes and see the truth when they're dead set on their beliefs no matter how wrong they actually are. When you put on your sunglasses and open your third eye, you see all the propaganda on the billboards. And you see what the elites really are. And this was actually a quote by a dude in the movie. "These guys run everything. There is no way to stop them." And it was brilliant. My favorite line from the fight was when Roddy Piper's character John Nada was like, "Brother, you either put on the damn sunglasses or start eating that trash can." There really should be more movies like this. It updates the 50s paranoia into the late 80s, early 90s fear, economic collapse, xenophobia. But this is only a surface interpretation. In truth, it's a clever satire that only a few will appreciate. It plays on our notion of who we are, whether the human race can actually have enemies or would always be its own enemy. It also parodies our selfishness, stupidity, and blindness to situations that are really around us. our ability to go on with a situation that we know is intolerable, and it's about how one man, two men could reach the breaking point. Homoerotic undertones? Yeah, I think so. Like, isn't the black guy jealous at one point in the movie? This is going a little far, but this movie reminds me of the Megadeth album Peace Sells of Who's Buying. Like, I don't know if Carpenter was a Megadeth fan, but this CD practically was the soundtrack to the movie, because the album does have a lot to do with the social questioning, and even at the end of The Conjuring, he says, "Obey," just like in the movie. And funny enough, there was a TV show with a similar concept called V that was made before this. It was a TV show about lizards parading as normal humans. I'd say it came out around early to mid-80s, around 1984. It's a pretty forgotten mini-TV series and one I thought was pretty decent. The correlation between these reptilian aliens and the whole Nazi German theme is extremely realistic if you are familiar with certain aspects of conspiracy history. And how do I know about this series? Well, my uncle introduced it to me with a VHS tape. Plus, the iconic Robert Englund was a part of that show. Yes, for those who grew up watching the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, you all know who he is. And if I'm not mistaken, but I believe the show came out around the same time as the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So this pretty much came out around the same time Robert Englund was becoming popular. Yeah. But back to the movie. One cast member that I remember seeing from this direct-to-video movie called Project the Shadow Chaser goes by the name of Meg Foster. And I remember watching that movie after renting it from Hollywood Video. And I swear, she has like the most unique eyes I've ever seen, but she does a pretty solid job here. One thing I gotta point out here was that John Carpenter wanted Kurt Russell for this movie, but already used him in 4 movies in the 80s. The stand-in Roddy Piper is actually good, and as a wrestling fan, or at least used to be, I'm generally weary on wrestler actors, and for good reason. Do I need to remind anyone of Triple H's performance in Blade Trinity? What about Hulk Hogan in No Holds Barred? But Piper somehow managed to escape the bad wrestler-actor formula and turns it into a pretty good performance. And yeah, this movie is a timeless classic. The signature 1980s dark comedy is so refreshing, especially in this new millennium of political correctness and Hollywood censorship. And speaking of censorship, or if you even consider it as such, but about a year ago I saw a clip from an interview with Keith David, and he was telling the interviewer about how the movie was #1 at the box office the week it came out and was mysteriously pulled from theaters with no explanation. Not sure what that was for, because movies like this at the time were always reviewed badly, and we all just ignored it because it sounded cool. The movie accurately portrays what's been happening for a long time now. It's kind of hilarious that Carpenter intended the movie as a scathing indictment of capitalism and the culture of greed. But as 2020 rolled around, it's become clear that the film is an even better anthology for shrieking commie cancel culture and creepy glass-eyed Bill Gates corona hoax depopulation agendas. Like, I'm not saying that all conspiracy theories are true, but there is some middle ground between the world most of us see and the world of they live, which is the true reality. Unfortunately, as Carpenter put it, those who go to the movies these days don't want to be enlightened. And I can completely understand why, because today's audience just wants to see nothing but Michael Bay crap and MCU fucking garbage. But I'm not gonna get into that stuff, but all in all, this is hands down one of the single most important mainstream commentaries on international politics, and the sorry mental state of general populace ever made. Even more creative and pointed by George Orwell. It is a blistering indictment of the power elite in this country and others' greed and love of money. Power knows no geographical boundaries, and is a testament to power of arts to convey important messages that would be banned for their controversiality if they were not wrapped in the guise of, oh, say a B- science fiction movie. John Carpenter had several great ideas, but this was different in that it was utilizing an idea that was already in the public consciousness at the time. But all in all, this was a great flick. If you have no good ideas for what movies to watch, then I would suggest John Carpenter's masterpiece for its anti-consumerism message. And that's pretty much it, people. Alright, that was my review. Later.